New microphone? Does it sound different? If so, that's why. The old one is kind of falling apart, so it's time for a new one. This video is sponsored by Phaetus and their new Cocoon filament dryer. I'll show you that in a moment. So this is a first. We're doing Orca Slicer. If you don't know what Orca Slicer is, well, I hope you know what a slicer is. If you don't, it slices your models for 3D printing. So you put an STL file in and it turns that into G-code for your printer. Time was, well, if we go back far enough, we have something called Slick 3er, which then became Prusa Slicer when Prusa took over development. Prusa Slicer is very much still a thing. Because of the way open source licenses work, that code, the code of Prusa Slicer, can be used by anyone, including other companies. And that code was forked off to make Bamboo Slicer, which Bamboo Lab machines use. And because of the way open source licenses work, that code can be used by anyone, including other individuals. And so Soft Fever forked the Bamboo version off probably about a year ago into, maybe more, into Orca Slicer. This is Orca Slicer 2. It was in beta when I started writing this script and testing for it, but at the time of writing the script, it was RC1, which is release candidate, and as I'm talking now, reading the script, it's actually now released. So yeah, by the time this video comes out, I feel like it might be Orca Slicer 4 or something. There's definitely a lot going on with Orca Slicer at the moment. Anyway, enough talk, because talk means editing, and I hate that. So let's get straight to the first cool Orca Slicer feature for version 2 that I want to cover, which is Space Bees. Kind of. It's 3D honeycomb infill. You see, bees don't make 3D infill. They make 2D hexagons, which are just extruded forwards. Obviously, if you've ever seen a beehive, you'll know that. So if you want 3D honeycomb, I don't know, maybe you could take bees into zero gravity, maybe. 3D honeycomb itself as an infill is not new at all, but it's been improved for this version. By the way, we are using the Comgrow T300 for this video because it's sat on my desk. But seriously, it supports all the features I'm going to be going through in this video, which is actually not that common, as you'll see. There's a relatively vanilla Clipper operating system behind this machine. I'll stick links below to go and check out this printer if you want to know more about it, or if you want to know more about the upcoming SV08, which everyone is talking about, and I've got one sat here next to me, but I can't show you it for at least another couple of days. So 3D honeycomb is kind of sort of pitched as being equivalent to gyroid, or you might pronounce it gyroid. I pronounce it gyroid because I'm normal. This is probably not entirely a good comparison because gyroid is a minimum surface, and I don't think Space Bee infill is. But also, if you look down the middle, you can see that it doesn't quite cover all the dimensions. You've got visible holes all the way through, if that makes sense, compared to gyroid, which is sort of trying. I think the whole point of it is it doesn't have that. Nonetheless, for most practical purposes, you probably won't notice the difference between gyroid infill and 3D honeycomb, and it prints faster, and I think potentially it maybe also prints without the your printer is being shaken apart kind of vibes that you get with gyroid on newer printers. I've noticed a lot with newer, faster printers, if they print infill quite quickly, it does sound particularly terrible, going at like 600 millimeters per second. And quite a lot of the time I've had to turn that down because it sort of feels like it's shaking the printer apart. Next up seems to be scarf joints. This one is a can of worms and a half. Just trying to get my head around it took days and a ton of prints, and I'm not even close to the point where I would if I was making a video about scarf joints. I'm not at the point where I would present it because I don't feel like I've really got to the end of testing, but I've got deadlines to get this video out, and I don't want to spend ages testing something that other people have already done, so I've stopped messing about with this, and I'll show you some examples. The basic principle is a scarf joint is an actual thing at least in woodworking. If you Google it, this seems to have started with an issue raised on the Orca Slicer GitHub by user Vaguden. I'm sure that's pronounced exactly correctly. They explained how it works quite succinctly. If I get the right end of the stick, what you're doing is you're sloping up the extrusion and then you're meeting it again at the point where the line comes around and joins. And so for a certain amount of the extruded line, which is a parameter you can change, it creates a overlap. The obvious problem here is that this is technically under extrusion at the beginning of a line, and a lot of work has been done to make sure that lines extrude consistently. You've got linear advance or pressure advance. So yeah, maybe it doesn't make the actual wedge that you want, but it does seem to work. So yeah, it seems like a lot of people have been trying to tune this, and I'll link what I've got below in terms of the links to the people who've been doing this. I did some tests on it, as I mentioned. I have to say that using defaults as they come on Orca Slicer, that did not impress me. I couldn't really see a lot of difference. Also, I want to see it close up because I want to see what's going on here at the joints. If only there was a way to do that. Scarf joints is a huge your mileage may vary. I'm yet to be convinced it's the game changer it initially appears to be, because it seems to have to be tuned quite heavily. But who knows? I'm sure that kind of thing was said about retraction at one time, and we don't even give that a second thought now. Speaking of tuning, this one is something I actually came across in real life myself not too long ago. I was trying to help a friend on an issue he was having with trying to tune ironing on a part, but it wasn't behaving as expected, and we narrowed it down to this issue. I'm not really sure whether we don't understand why it happens. I can sort of think I see why it happens. My theory is that it's related to the overlap volume. When you join infill and edges, some of where the infill meets the edges has to overlap, otherwise it won't lock together. And if you have a longer line, there's more time to balance this out. On a shorter one, the overlap means a lot more material is being put in a smaller space. Either way, this flow compensation is an attempt to fix this issue, whatever the reason, and it becomes yet another parameter to understand in the slicer. Slicers are getting more complicated, this is a fact, but there you go. I guess it keeps me in work. Ultimately, does this setting work? Yes. Does it need tinkering with? Yes. Now, getting seams and top layer looking perfect is one thing, but if your filament is wet, it is pointless trying to dial all this stuff in because the print quality will suffer visibly and minor quality tweaks will be the last thing you're worried about, which is a decent segue to the sponsor of this video. This is the new filament dryer called Cocoon from Phaetus, and it should be available for sale at about the time of the release of this video. The first thing you might notice about this dryer is that it seems not to need a power cable, and it takes instead 3 AAA batteries. This is exactly what I want to talk about. You see, a lot of people misunderstand filament humidity, and it's forgivable because it's a complicated topic, so much so that this is in fact the second rewrite of me trying to explain this particular section. There is one thing that keeps popping up on the internet and it bugs me, and that is the idea that you can't dry filament with desiccant. If you put desiccant into a sealed container of air, it will adsorb, with a D, the moisture from that air, leaving it at a lower moisture content. I think we all understand that, even though that's the hardest bit to actually explain. So I won't. If you now introduce a wet filament that became wet from the environment into that sealed box, you now have moisture in that filament that wants to leave and maintain the equilibrium in the box. So some of that moisture will leave the filament and go into the air inside the box. Guess what? The silica gel will then suck that out of the air too. And then you get the idea. You're creating a sort of moisture conveyor belt in the box from the filament to the air and from the air to the silica gel. How else do you think it would work? Anyway, this is exactly the technique the Cocoon filament dryer employs. Now, I won't pretend that it's faster than a heated dryer because it's not, but the reality is that if you need to dry your filaments, you probably also need to keep them dry on an ongoing basis. And that's where you will see the advantages in something like this kind of dryer. It is completely enclosed in operation, so you can just feed it into a printer and not need to be plugged in and generating heat constantly, which is obviously a great improvement if you are doing multi-day prints. Admittedly, that was quite a long sponsor segment, but a fair bit of it was the kind of thing I would put in a normal video if I made one about humidity at this point, so I'd hope you learned something about how you can leverage the environment to dry filaments in storage, and that gives you more options on ways to manage your filament. If you are interested in the new Cocoon from Phaetus, then please do use the links below in the description to check out the dryer, or indeed any of the other cool things that Phaetus make, because they have been making some cool things lately. Anyway, let's get back to Orca Slicer. Klipper recently-ish implemented adaptive mesh. It's not as complicated as it sounds. The basic principle is that you can generate a bed mesh for just the area you're planning to print on. Now, Prusa already does this. I don't know off the top of my head who came first, but I think the rule of thumb is that if Prusa ever did anything, we generally say that Prusa invented it, so we'll go with that. Adaptive mesh is also a thing in Marlin and RepRap firmware, and I'm not covering that here. The video is long enough as it is. We'll just look at Klipper. To get adaptive bed mesh working, your Klipper install needs to be pretty recent, I think 0.12 or beyond, so that means quite a few production machines are out as they ship with surprisingly old Klipper installs. But don't worry, Sovol has your back. Both the Comgrow T300 here and the super secret SV08, you have no idea how many times I had to say that, they both run adaptive leveling by default. You have to update the T300 if you haven't already, but it does support adaptive leveling. To get adaptive mesh working requires you to align several things, including the version of Klipper, the start macro, the fairly recent cancel objects function, the start G-code in the slicer, and a random setting shown here. I think that's everything. Prusa Slicer and Cura do also support adaptive bed mesh. I will mention that. It's not an Orca Slicer only thing. If you want more info on this and how to set it up, including how to set it up in Prusa Slicer and I think also Cura, I will point you at a video that Modbot made where he details the exact process in way more detail than the few seconds I've given it here. So what's new about this in this Orca release is not a lot, actually. It took some poking around, but as far as I can tell, it's just some of the variables that pass through from the slicer to Klipper. And in the case of Klipper, this would normally be defined in the printer config. Now, I could see why margin would be useful to use as a parameter that you change per print. Some prints might need a margin. I can't entirely think why off the top of my head, but I could see it being useful. That is effectively what the change allows you to do. After that, I'm glad the next feature is a lot easier to explain. I can do it in one sentence. There is a tick box to remove the bamboo stuff from Orca. This is really handy if you don't use it, because I, for one, think that it kind of looks a bit cluttered and weird if you aren't a Bamboo user and you've never used a Bamboo machine and you're faced with the Bamboo plugin. It does look weird. The final feature I want to look at is called counter borehole bridging, which flows off the tongue. This is a problem that's most easily demonstrated rather than explained, I think. The print you can see here is impossible from this orientation. But the smart idea that SuperSlicer, not Orca, SuperSlicer, apparently implemented way back in 2019, basically consists of the idea that if you print one single bridging layer, you can just punch through it at the time of using the part. I'm surprised this wasn't particularly well known, but I guess it highlights how niche SuperSlicer was back then. That's not a diss. Maker's Muse made a video on this, and I too have covered similar sacrificial bridging techniques a while ago in a video myself. In fact, we did some digging on Discord and we found Tommy. Tommy made a blog article on this in 2017 or possibly before, and Hackaday picked it up. And in the comments to that article, someone linked Knophead, who is one of the big names in 3D printing historically. He did something similar to this in 2014. So I think it's one of those things that just keeps on getting rediscovered, because it's kind of semi-obvious, but only if you think about it for long enough. Anyway, what this means is that there's no longer a need to design around this kind of concept in CAD, because it's now in Orca Slicer, and it should be pretty useful. Although you'll have to comment below on whether you'll just use supports or change orientation. I guess, like most things in practice, it just depends on the part. There is a whole ton more stuff and fixes in Orca Slicer, and I've never actually covered the slicer before, even though I have used it for a while, so I would recommend checking it out if you haven't already, especially if you come from the Bamboo or Prusa Slicer ecosystem, because it should be fairly intuitive, especially from the Bamboo side of things. There's a pretty big list of printers supported now, and it's good to see manufacturers now also getting involved. As you can see with Sovol, for example, they've supplied their latest printers with Orca, and you'll see in my SV08 video that's coming very soon that it works out of the box with Orca. No spoilers though, you'll just have to subscribe for that and wait a couple of days. As always, comment below, maybe tell me what you think of Orca and whether you use it already and why, and whether you've been using it for a while, whether you're the first person to use it. I'm sure I am. I've been using it for 5 years. 5 years. I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.